Welcome back to CS170. We're going to be finishing up the intro to JavaScript for this week. So the last lecture we covered the introduction to JavaScript with the variables. Hopefully you had a chance to digest that a little bit, go into that W3 schools explanation, try out a couple of those things. I'm going to show you a couple of things right now to work with variables. Remember, variables are essentially references to memory locations or buckets that you can assign things into those buckets. You can put stuff into those buckets and then you can do things with them. So for example, if you have some numbers, you can add the numbers together. You can calculate averages and whatnot, all kinds of equations. You can do stuff with strings. You can concatenate the strings. You can format the strings. You can format the numbers too. We'll go to that in a second. And Booleans are types of variables that can be true or false. Okay. And so let's step into this a little bit. Okay. We have. You saw a little bit of it with the W3 schools. Let me actually go back to here just as a refresher. Okay, so JavaScript variable W3 schools. Okay, so you remember this. You remember one, in this case, we're just using some simple variables here. And then you're going to assign them or initialize them, right? So in this case, we declared a variable as x, and then we assigned it to be the value of 5. Another one, we declared a variable y and assigned it to be 6, and then we did something where we did x plus y, right? And then it should assign 11 to z. Okay, so this is just a reminder. I mentioned this in the last lecture, so you should take a look at this and see if there's any questions on it. But let's come back to here. So here you have what they're trying to emphasize here is that you can assign the value, in this case, let's say the tax rate 0.88 into this tax rate here. Okay, so notice up here we declared the variables. We declared tax rate and the balance due. Okay, and it looks like there's a typo here, so let's put the A in here. Okay, yeah, that looks right. Okay, so anyway, and all it is that the value has to go from right to left, right? You can't do it the other way around. You can't do 0.88 equals to the tax rate. It's always the variable in front equals to whatever you want to assign to it. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. And this the emphasis of this one particular slide here, so something to remember. And here where it says optionally you can declare and assign at the same time, that's exactly what I was highlighting here, where you declare it and you assign it all at the same time in one line. Okay, so up here you just declared it and then you just assigned it afterwards. Here you declared it. Remember, var is what you're using to declare a variable. Balance due, and then you're assigning it a 0. Okay, so you're doing it all in one shot. This is what they mean by declaring and assigning the variable. Okay, so this part declares and this part assigns it to be 0. Okay, and I think it's similar to how I mentioned in the last lecture, where it's good to put these type of things at the top of wherever you're writing your code. You could put this all over the place. You could, like, before, like I said, you can stick the var, you can declare that anywhere. But it's a little bit problematic to troubleshoot it if something goes wrong, right? Or to even, understand the code better for someone else, okay? And likewise, you could just declare, just like this, and then you can just assign this variable somewhere else further on down the code. But like here, or like here, you're pretty much assigning the variable some value as soon as possible, right? In this case, you're doing it over here. In this case, you're doing it as you're declaring it. This, to me, it's not a syntax thing, but it's a best practice, right? So you get some unpredictable results. Okay, if you kind of stick this assignment of or initialize this variable somewhere else in your code, far away from where you declared it. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much more on that point, but it's something for you to keep in mind. Oh, and I was actually going to wait until I finished up this lecture to upload the PowerPoint, but I decided to upload it earlier. There's no harm in having you seeing this before I do the lecture. So I went ahead and did that. So you can go to Lao Lectures and see that. So rules for writing numbers. Okay, I think all this is really saying is you see all this stuff here on the left. This is how you're setting it. All the stuff here on the right is really just formatting type of stuff, right? So from a computer processing standpoint, when they do their calculations, really this is what you're working with. The fact that you do, like, you stick a percentage sign in here, you stick a dollar sign in here, you know, these commas, that's all really formatting. The computer doesn't really care. So stuff like this. Right, so if you choose to format it in a certain way to show the commas, to show, let's say, the dollar sign or the percentages, that's more of a formatting thing. The numbers is what's important to the computer. So that's really what this is trying to say here, the rules for writing the numbers. Here for writing strings, I think, let's say this one right here where you're talking about the double quotes. So yes, that's true. You're gonna always have the string, and it's gonna be, you know, bookended by quotes, either double quotes or single quotes. And you might say, well, why do I have that? And it can get confusing if you get it, if you really try to get super fancy with this. So it depends on how you do it, but there will be times where you basically want to show some quote, and so whatever you have as your outside quote. So let's say I declare a string, and then has these double quotes in it, but within it you want to have a single quote. Then you can do it like that. So you can see here you have the single quote in here. And if there's something else you want to do in quotes, right? So let's say you want to do, like, I don't know, shots in quotes or something like that. You kind of do that in here. On the outside, you have the double quote. In this way, so when you assign the string, it doesn't get confused about what's a string and what is supposed to be inside that string. Okay. You remember the escape character bit here. So you have this as an escape to really alleviate some sort of confusion on this. Okay, so I guess, remember what I was saying was, if it's complex, it can get a little hairy there. Maybe to keep yourself out of trouble, the safe thing to do is to use the escape characters here. Okay, so that's essentially what this backslash will do for you here. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you in a second, so don't worry too much about that. And then you have your empty string, it's just your double quotes like this. Okay, and similar to numbers, you can initialize a string as you do the declaration. Okay, and then these are just arithmetic operations, right? So things you're typically used to, right? You can do add, subtract, division, multiplication, and so you just have to say it like this, right? So you have A times B, okay? So you can't, like in some cases, you might be tempted to just, like, you know, put A and B next to each other and say that's going to be a multiplication, right? But you should just put this star here, asterisk, to make that multiplication happen. This mod, I don't know if you remember, very early in the semester, I was trying to do a mod in the Excel spreadsheet, and I forgot that you know, it's actually a mod function. Okay, So mod is basically just taking the remainder, right? So you remember I was taking remainders for the numeric conversions when I was doing the Excel spreadsheet, okay? And pemdas is basically like the order of operations when you want to do like some complex math. So you might remember that from grade school. So let me see if I remember here. So P would be parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Okay, so similar to what you might have seen in grade school for mixing different things together for your math. Um, and you can play around with that also. You can come up with some complex formula. And so what I really want to show you right now, similar to like this HTML, uh, the thing where I showed you before, where you basically show the HTML as you coded it. So you can, on the left hand side, you put in HTML and you see the output on the right hand side. Similar type of thing you can do with this thing called JSDo. Okay, so you look on the left hand side, you can see script, right? You see script up here, and you have script down here, and you can mix in HTML in here too. And then you look on the right, you can see the output from it. Okay, so again, it's one of those type of things. I know you guys saw this when you were doing your homework, like assignment 3, right? Where you had to mess around with the HTML file and then load it into your browser to kind of see whether you got it correct or not. So that's the way you would actually do it if you had to create the web page. This I like to do just so I can see instant results. I can put in my stuff here and then I can see something here. So I can play around with stuff and see the output here right away. As you know, you can't just go straight from this into submit it for your assignment, let's say. You would have to save it into a proper HTML file and then we would load it up. Okay, but your TAs will work with you. They could be using VS Code or some other editors. Just for me to demonstrate for you in class, I like to do this because like I said, I can do this and I can see instant result on this side. Okay, so I won't belabor that point. Let me go through a couple of things here. And don't worry so much about all these different things. We're going to cover them as we go. This is just like your quick intro into JavaScript. We'll be doing more. Don't worry about that. So let me step down to here. So when you go to JS.do, it's actually going to have all these sample snippets of code here for you already. So I think that's very helpful also. And then you can just go in here and just stick in whatever you want. But let me come to this one section here because it's working with numbers. Right, and actually there's a bit of a strings in here too, but let me elaborate. So here you declared the variable, right? This is n, right? Again, not really naming a great variable name here, but that's we'll leave that. And we set the variable to be 9. Okay, so we assign this variable with the value of 9, and then we're just going to do 9 times 9, right? And we're going to stick that into this variable x. Okay, so we declared the variable x, and we assign the results of this calculation, n times n. Okay, and you can play around with this. I'm going to say, let's say for your extra credit for this week, take this, right? It's great. You don't have to start from scratch. You have all kinds of examples here, and just play around with it a bit. Right? Don't worry about these things here. These are for loops that's going to come in subsequent weeks, later weeks. But you're going to take some of these, and let's say for example, I want to make this a more complex calculation, right? So I'm going to do times n plus n, something like that. Okay. What was minus? Yeah. So and then I can do minus, let's say 3 times n. I think that kind of exercises all of the things from PEMDAS. Right, so we have PEMDAS. Oh, I didn't do exponent. Yeah, so maybe as part of your extra credit, you can stick an exponent in here, right? So PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So, you know, I just monkeyed around in here. I made this calculation a little bit more complex. I didn't add the division or exponent or the division. So maybe as part of your extra credit, you guys can go ahead and, you know, stick something in here, right? And then here I played around with a little bit. When you look at the JSDo, the default is actually going to show all of this as a string and do a plus x here, okay? And what that would show is something like this. It would show result of n times n equals to 81. But what I did, and you know, I just kind of did it before class. I just went in here. I broke it up a little bit just to show you a bit more how this. Oh, and before I do that, document write is how in JavaScript you write something to the screen. Right. So this is kind of useful, and I'm going to actually create a separate lecture to do debugging. Right. So debugging is not really taught as a separate component for this class, but I think if you guys write enough JavaScript, I know in the times I've been teaching it, a lot of times people get errors and they don't know what to do from there, how to figure out what's wrong. So I'm going to actually create a special video to give some pointers on how to do debugging. Okay, so the reason why I mentioned that, document write, I find is a good way to do some debugging, right? So you can, it's almost like a print statement. You can print all over the place. So you print your variables and, you know, you can see where something is broken. So anyway, so here's your double quotes, and here's another double quote. So whatever you put in here is what it's going to print. So result of. So you see result of over here. And then in here, this is where I'm going to show plus means to add things together. Like if I have one string and one string, I do a plus behind it. It basically puts the two strings together into one big string. Okay, so that's what, whenever you see something like this where I'm going to do a print and I'm going to put some strings together, that's what a plus does. It's basically what I would say concatenating the strings together. Now in this case, we're not actually putting a string, but we're actually showing the variable. In this case, we have variable n, right? So this is where I saw result of, and it's concatenated with the value of n, which is 9, right? So when I print this document, right, it's called printing it. When I say print, it's going to print not n, which is the name of the variable, but it's going to print the value inside the variable, which is 9, right? So that's the important thing here. Then I do another plus sign to add another string. In this case, I want to show an asterisk. So I put a double quote around this. This is essentially another string that I concatenate onto this. And then I do another plus sign because I want to show the value of n again. Okay, and plus, and then equals, concatenate, and then plus x, which is this variable here, which has everything. Okay, I don't even know what all this is after I run it. So I'm going to do run. See this run on the left hand side here? I run it, and I came up with a crazy number here, minus 729. Okay, so back to my point about the extra credit. You know, I'd like you to play with what's written here. None of this is something that I wrote. Well, actually, this bit I wrote, but a lot of it is just came from default. So although some of these topics are going to be stuff I'm going to cover more in next week, you know, don't hesitate. Play around with these things a little bit, right? Just like I went here, I stuck in a couple of things here. I'm encouraging you to go in here and stick in the exponent and stick in the division in here, you know, just to see how the order of operations plays out as you would expect. Let me go back to here for a second. Let's say I did want to say print out the variable name, okay? And I'm just going to take this out. Right? I'm going to make this one big string, and I'm going to say times n equals, right? And what would I expect? And you would see result of 9 times n, right? This is because I wanted to show this times n, right? Of course, I've changed this to totally not match this now, right? So if I want to be lazy, I'm just going to take this sucker like this, copy it, and I'm going to just stick it all inside the quote like that. and then I'm going to run it, and that's what I get. Okay, so if I want to show what the variable names are and just essentially show this equation I use, I'm going to just print it out. I just did a copy and paste and showed it like that. If I want to show what's inside of n, that's where I go into breaking it out, right? So let me do a plus sign here and say this is, let me stick it here because I want to show the answer here, equals that, and then I'm going to do another thing after this. I'm going to say plus variable n equals, and then I'm going to do a plus n because I want to show the value of n, what's inside of n. And you can see what happened here, right? So I showed this whole formula equals to this minus 729, and then I said variable n equals to, and then I said n, and then this will display what was inside of n. Okay, so this is something pretty basic. You can see up here there's strings, so they chose their examples, they chose to do stuff with strings. So I'm going to encourage you for the extra credit for this week. Hopefully you can exercise your creative thoughts here. You know, mess around with this, create some funky formulas here, display what formula you used, show the results of that calculation, and you know, maybe do something where you break out the different variables. In this case, we only have n and x, but I don't know, I can declare another variable, var abc equals 1, 2, 3. Okay, and don't forget the semicolon. Okay, and then I'll do something like this. I'll do a plus variable abc equals plus abc, and let's see what that comes out with. And see, I added on to this variable abc equals to 1, 2, 3. So I'm encouraging you for your extra credit to do things. Create some new variables, play around with printing and concatenating different things here, right? Like I said here, let's practice that pemdas rule here, right? And then up here in the string, practice doing different types of things to stick strings together. Notice one interesting thing here is basically putting within the string the HTML tags. Okay, so again, something you can play around with. Okay, it's also relevant here. You can see what happened here. They put in B, right? Lesson 3, right? You guys know what happened when you put a B next to it for your tag, right? So B and then slash B. Okay, so for your extra credit, I want you to do this, right? Play around with the numbers for your variables, play around with the strings, play around with embedding the HTML tags with your strings. Okay, although this is not stuff that, this is stuff I'm going to probably cover next week. I think these examples give you a good start. You can play around with it for yourself for this week. Okay, thank you for your time today, and good luck for the rest of the week.